Eva Braun, the woman who died with Hitler, 8 meters beneath the burning streets of Berlin, in a concrete bunker with walls 2 meters thick. A 33-year-old woman named Eva Hitler bit into a brass cyanide capsule. She'd been married for exactly 40 hours. Beside her, Adolf Hitler raised a Walther PPK 765 pistol to his right temple and pulled the trigger. The same model of gun that had killed his niece, Jelly Roble, 14 years earlier. But here's what most people don't know. Eva Braun wasn't just some random girlfriend who happened to be there at the end. Her story is far stranger and darker than that. It involves 2 suicide attempts, 16 years of living in the shadows, and a decision to walk into hell when everyone else was running away. This is her complete story. And I've got to warn you, some of these details are disturbing. Eva Anna Paula Braun, 17 years and exactly 8 months old, was standing on a wooden ladder organizing photographic plates. Her boss, Heinrich Hoffmann, who'd later become Hitler's official photographer, had gone out to shoot at the English Garden. The shop door opened. Eva climbed down to see a man, approximately 40 years old, wearing a tan Burberry trenchcoat and dark fedora. He had this odd little mustache, the kind you'd see on silent film actors, and unusually intense pale blue eyes. Guten Tag, Eva said. Kann ich Ihnen helfen? The man removed his hat. Ich wollte aufhören. Hoffmann Eva offered him coffee. Standard practice for waiting customers. They sat down in the shop's small waiting area. And this is where it gets interesting. The man started asking Eva personal questions, her age, her family, what she liked to do next. Eva was from a typical middle-class Catholic family. Her father Friedrich, everyone called him Fritz, was a schoolteacher, earning about 20 Reichsmarks a month. Her mother Franziska was a seamstress. They lived at Isabella Strasse, 45, in a modest but respectable apartment. Eva herself had just started working at Hoffmann Studios 6 weeks earlier. Her salary, 12 Reichsmarks per week. That's roughly 50 Reichsmarks a month, barely enough to cover her expenses. So when this well-dressed man started showing interest in her, Eva was flattered. She had no idea who he was. When Hoffmann returned, about an hour later, he practically ran to greet the visitor. Ah, Herr Wolf. Sie sind from Geckermann. Herr Wolf, that's what Hoffmann called him in public. It was a code name later that day. Hermann Fischer, one of the studio's lab assistants, told Eva the truth. That wasn't Herr Wolf. That was Adolf Hitler, leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. Eva was stunned. She'd just spent an hour chatting with one of the most controversial politicians in Germany. And then something unexpected happened. Hitler came back. October 12th. Then October 19th. Then October 27th. Always, when Hoffmann was busy, always finding time to talk to Eva. By November, they were meeting outside the shop, a coffee date at Kaufheck on Galerie Estrus, a known Nazi hangout. Eva told her mother she was meeting girlfriends. Here's a detail most people don't know. Hitler's chauffeur Julius Schreck drove Eva home that day, but Eva had him drop her off 3 blocks from her apartment. She didn't want her parents seeing her arrive in a Mercedes-Benz. On December 24, 1929, Christmas Eve, Hitler gave Eva her first gift, a gold necklace with a small swastika pendant. Eva wore it hidden under her clothes, a secret symbol of their secret relationship. But here's what Eva didn't understand yet. Hitler had made this arrangement before, and it had ended in tragedy. Angela Roble, everyone called her Jelly, was found dead in Adolf Hitler's luxurious apartment at Prinzregent 16 in Munich. She was lying on the floor of her bedroom. Hitler's Walther PPK pistol was nearby. A single bullet had entered just below her left shoulder, traveled through her chest, and lodged in her heart. The official verdict was suicide. But the circumstances were suspicious as hell. Jelly was Hitler's half-niece, 19 years younger than him. She'd been living in his apartment since 1929, the exact same year Hitler met Eva. By the way, and according to multiple witnesses, Hitler was obsessively, pathologically possessive of Jelly. He controlled everything. Who she could see, where she could go, what she could wear. He had his drivers and bodyguards follow her constantly. Several people, including Rudolf Hess and Hermann Esser, later testified that Hitler flew into violent rages if he suspected Jelly was interested in other men. The night before her death, neighbors reported hearing a violent quarrel coming from Hitler's apartment, screaming, things breaking, then silence. The next morning, Jelly was dead. Here's what makes this relevant to Eva's story. The Munich police, several of whom were Nazi Party members, closed the investigation almost immediately. No autopsy was performed. The apartment was cleaned before investigators could properly examine it. Jelly's body was quickly transported to Austria for burial. Rumors immediately circulated. Had Hitler killed Jelly in a jealous rage? Had he ordered someone else to do it? Or had he driven her to suicide through psychological abuse? Hitler's political enemies seized on the scandal. For a few weeks in late 1931, it looked like this might destroy Hitler's career, but the Nazi Party's propaganda machine went into overdrive. They painted Jelly as a tragic figure who'd taken her own life due to unrequited love for someone else, not Hitler. They threatened journalists who suggested otherwise. And Hitler, he supposedly broke down, crying, talking about suicide. His driver had to watch him constantly to make sure he didn't kill himself. Whether Hitler's grief was genuine or performed, we'll never know. What we do know is this: Hitler kept Jelly's room exactly as she'd left it. Like a shrine, he hung her portrait prominently. On every anniversary of her death, he'd retreat into dark, uncommunicative moods. This created an impossible situation for Eva Braun. She was competing with a dead woman. And you can't compete with a ghost. Ghosts don't age, they don't argue. They exist in memory as perfect, tragic figures. Eva realized this pretty quickly, and it drove her to desperation. Eva Braun took her father's Walther 635 pistol from his desk drawer, the same model that had killed Jelly Robbel 13 months earlier. She pointed it at her chest and pulled the trigger. The bullet entered just above her left breast, traveled through muscle tissue, and stopped a few centimeters from her heart. Eva collapsed, bleeding but conscious. Now, here's where historians disagree. Some believe Eva genuinely wanted to die. Others, including Eva's own sister, Ilse, believed Eva staged the attempt to get Hitler's attention. Why would Ilse think that? Because Eva had told her sister just days before that Hitler was ignoring her, that she felt used and dispensable. And this is the crucial detail. Eva fired the shot at an angle that was unlikely to hit any vital organs. Plus, Eva called for help almost immediately. If she'd really wanted to die, why not wait? Regardless of her true intention, the attempt worked. Hitler rushed to the hospital when he heard brought expensive flowers, roses, Eva's favorite, spent nearly an hour alone with her in her room. Nobody knows what he said. But Eva recorded in her diary later that Hitler had begged for her forgiveness. Following her recovery, Hitler made significant changes. He rented Eva an apartment at Weidenmeyer Strasse 93, a nice place in a good neighborhood. He started paying her 400 Reichsmarks per month, more than most working Germans earned. Eva had become Hitler's official mistress, and all it took was shooting herself. Then, just 10 weeks later, everything changed. On January 30, 1933, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. The Nazi Party was now in power. Here's one of the strangest aspects of Eva Braun's life. From 1933 to 1945, 12 years, the vast majority of Germans had absolutely no idea she existed. Hitler moved to Berlin. Eva stayed in Munich. Hitler's schedule became impossibly demanding. Eva saw him maybe once every few weeks, if she was lucky. Sometimes months would pass, and Here's what's remarkable. Even most high-ranking Nazi officials didn't know who Eva was. Hermann Göring didn't meet her until 1935. Goebbels barely acknowledged her existence. Albert Speer later wrote that he'd seen Eva around the Berghof, but assumed she was just one of the staff. Why did Hitler keep Eva so hidden? His entire propaganda operation was built around Hitler as this ascetic leader who'd sacrificed personal happiness for Germany. Germany is my bride, he'd say in speeches. I have no time for personal matters, a girlfriend especially. One 23 years younger than him would undermine that image completely, so Eva lived in comfortable imprisonment. Hitler paid her bills, bought her clothes and jewelry, but she couldn't appear in public with him, couldn't attend state functions, couldn't even tell people who she was. Imagine that for a second. You're in a relationship with one of the most famous men in the world, and you have to pretend you don't exist. By May 1935, Eva had had enough. Hitler hadn't visited her in months. She felt completely abandoned. On May 28, 1935, Eva took 20 tablets of Phanodorm, a powerful barbiturate sleeping pill. She left a note addressed to Hitler and her sister. Then she lay down on her bed to die. Her sister Ilse found her unconscious about an hour later and called an ambulance. Again, Eva survived. And again, Hitler responded. This time, he invited Eva to the Berghof, his massive mountain retreat near Berchtesgaden that he'd just finished rebuilding at a cost of several million Reichsmarks. The Berghof would become Eva's permanent home for the next 10 years. The Berghof was spectacular. Perched at over 1,800 meters elevation on the Obersalzberg mountain, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Bavarian Alps. The house had more than 30 rooms, a massive terrace, an indoor swimming pool, and a private cinema. Eva had her own suite bedroom, bathroom, dressing room. Hitler employed a full staff: cooks, maids, gardeners, drivers. Eva could have almost anything she wanted, except freedom. Here's a detail from Albert Speer's memoirs that's really revealing. When important visitors came to the Berghof, foreign dignitaries, military commanders, Nazi officials, Eva was required to make herself invisible. She'd eat her meals in her room, stay out of public areas. Sometimes she wouldn't leave her suite for days. Only when Hitler was relaxing with his inner circle was Eva allowed to appear, and even then, Hitler made it clear what he expected. Eva was to look beautiful, stay quiet, and not discuss politics or serious matters. Speer wrote about one incident in 1943. Germany had just transitioned to total war economy, which meant potential rationing of cosmetics and luxury goods. Eva approached Hitler in high indignation about possibly losing access to makeup and perfumes. Hitler quietly told Speer to make sure Eva's supplies continued, because keeping Eva happy and occupied was easier than dealing with another suicide attempt. Eva's daily routine was mind-numbing. She'd wake up around noon, sunbathe on the terrace for hours. She was obsessed with having a perfect tan, exercise, watch movies in Hitler's private cinema. They'd screen 2 or 3 films almost every night, and she'd take photographs. Eva owned several expensive cameras. Lycus and photographing became her main creative outlets. She took thousands of pictures at the Berghof. Hitler relaxing in civilian clothes, Nazi officials pretending to be normal people, the staff playing with Hitler's German Shepherd, Blondie. These photographs would later become some of the only images of Hitler in private moments. After the war, the Allies found Eva's photo albums and home movies. They show a side of Hitler the German public never saw: laughing, playing with children, looking almost human. But Eva's photos also reveal something darker. There are no Jews in these pictures. Disabled people. No political opponents. Eva's world was a carefully curated paradise where undesirable people simply didn't exist. Hitler visited the Berghof irregularly. Sometimes, he'd stay for weeks, bringing his entire staff with him. Sometimes he'd be absent for months, conducting the war from various military headquarters. When Hitler was present, he largely ignored Eva. He'd acknowledge her at mealtimes, watch films together in the evening. But there was no physical affection in front of others. Hitler never even held her hand in public. Eva's diary entries from this period are heartbreaking. She wrote, "He needs me only for certain purposes, and I sit here and wait and wait. The hours turn into days and nothing happens." Meanwhile, outside Eva's mountain paradise, Hitler's regime was committing genocide on an industrial scale. At the Berghof, life continued almost normally. Eva sunbathed, watched films, took photographs. She had no idea what was really happening. Here's something historians have documented. Eva Braun was never a member of the Nazi Party, according to multiple sources, including Heinrich Hoffmann's post-war testimony. Eva had almost no interest in politics. Hoffmann described her worldview as inconsequential and featherbrained. Eva's concerns were fashion, film stars, and her dogs. She didn't read newspapers, didn't listen to radio broadcasts about the war, didn't ask questions about where Hitler was or what he was doing. And Hitler actively encouraged this ignorance. He wanted Eva to be his escape from the pressures of conducting a world war. When he visited the Berghof, he didn't want to discuss military strategy or political crises. He wanted to watch Disney movies and listen to Wagner operas. So Eva remained deliberately, willfully ignorant. She didn't know about the invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, didn't know about the mass murder of Jews at places like Treblinka and Auschwitz, didn't know about the brutal fighting at Stalingrad that killed over 1 million people. Or maybe she knew and chose not to think about it. That's the charitable interpretation. The less charitable interpretation is that Eva enjoyed the privileges of being Hitler's companion, the houses, the servants, the unlimited money without caring where any of it came from. By 1944, though, the war was coming closer. Allied bombers were hitting Munich regularly. In July 1944, Eva's family home was damaged in an air raid. Eva contacted Hitler, begging for help. According to witnesses, Hitler responded coldly. He said he had more pressing concerns than one damaged house in Munich. Millions of Germans were suffering. Eva's family wasn't special. That was apparently one of the few times Eva showed genuine emotion about the war. Not because of the millions dying, but because her family's house had been damaged. Also, in July 1944, a group of German army officers tried to assassinate Hitler with a bomb at his military headquarters in East Prussia. Hitler survived with minor injuries, but the failed assassination attempt made him increasingly paranoid. Around this time, Eva's younger sister Gretel married an SS officer named Hermann Fegelein. Hitler had arranged the marriage. Fegelein was Heinrich Himmler's liaison officer at Hitler's headquarters. This marriage would later have fatal consequences for Fegelein and devastating consequences for Gretel. By early 1945, the situation was catastrophic. Soviet armies were driving deep into Germany from the east. American and British forces were crossing the Rhine from the west. German cities were being bombed into rubble. Millions of refugees were fleeing westward. Hitler's inner circle was urging him to leave Berlin, go to the Berghof, negotiate surrender, or escape to South America. There were plans for exactly that. Hitler refused. He would stay in Berlin. He would die in Berlin. On January 16, 1945, Hitler moved into the Vorbunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, a concrete tomb 8 meters underground, with walls 2 meters thick, and Eva Braun made the decision that would define her legacy. Eva Braun traveled from the Berghof to Berlin. It was an extremely dangerous journey. Allied fighters were shooting anything that moved on German roads. Soviet artillery was already Hitting Berlin's eastern suburbs, Eva arrived at the Reich Chancellery around 3 o'clock p.m. She was escorted down into the bunker complex. When Hitler saw her, witnesses reported he was furious. Was Max du Hire? What are you doing here? Geh sofort, Zurich Norchmund. Go back to Munich immediately. Eva's response was simple. Ich bleib bei meinem. Staying with you, bis zum Ende. To the end. Think about what this meant. Hermann Göring had already fled to Bavaria. Heinrich Himmler was secretly negotiating surrender. Albert Speer had said his goodbyes. Generals were deserting their posts. Anyone with any sense was getting as far from Berlin as possible, but Eva voluntarily walked into a bunker that was clearly going to become her tomb. Why? Some historians think Eva genuinely loved Hitler and wanted to die with him. Others believe she was seeking her place in history. If she couldn't be famous in life, she'd be remembered in death. Still others think she simply had nowhere else to go. After 16 years of being Hitler's secret companion, what kind of life could she have had after his death? The bunker was a nightmare. Cramped, concrete rooms with harsh electric lighting, natural light whatsoever. The walls constantly shaking from Soviet artillery. Bombardment, the air thick with diesel. Fumes from the generators, the smell of mildew, and what witnesses described as the stench of fear. The bunker complex housed about 40 people by mid-April. Hitler, Eva, Joseph, and Magda Goebbels and their 6 children, aged 4 to 12. Hitler's personal secretary, Martin Bormann. Various military officers, doctors, secretaries, guards, and Hitler youth soldiers, who'd been assigned to defend the Chancellery. Food was running low. Water was rationed. The single toilet for everyone except Hitler and Eva frequently backed up. April 20th was Hitler's 56th birthday. They held a pathetic celebration in the bunker. A small cake, some cognac. Eva smiled and made small talk, trying to maintain morale. Outside, Soviet artillery was pounding Berlin. By April 28th, Soviet troops were less than 500 meters from the Chancellery. You could hear Russian voices shouting. Machine gun fire was constant. That same day, Hitler received devastating news. The BBC reported that Heinrich Himmler, supposedly Hitler's most loyal follower, had been secretly trying to negotiate surrender with the Western Allies. Hitler erupted, screaming, throwing things, ordering Himmler's arrest and execution. Though Himmler was far beyond Hitler's reach. But Hitler could reach Hermann Fegelein, Eva's brother-in-law. Fegelein had been trying to desert the bunker, was caught by SS guards, and was brought back. Hitler ordered him executed for cowardice and treachery. Eva begged Hitler to spare Fegelein. He was her sister's husband, the father of her niece. Gretel had given birth just weeks earlier. Hitler refused. Fegelein was taken to the Chancellery garden and shot on April 28th, that same night. Hitler made a decision. He would marry Eva Braun. April 30th, 1945, began with the sound of Soviet artillery growing steadily louder. At some point during the morning, Hitler's dog handler took Hitler's German Shepherd, Blondie, to test the cyanide capsules. They wanted to make sure that poison would work. The dog died within seconds. Hitler spent the late morning saying goodbye to his staff, shaking hands, distributing cyanide capsules to those who wanted them, giving final instructions. His orders were explicit. After he and Eva were dead, their bodies were to be carried up to the Chancellery garden, doused with gasoline, and burned. He did not want his corpse put on display like Mussolini's had been just days earlier. Around 2:30 p.m., Hitler and Eva said their final goodbyes to the bunker staff. Some people were crying. Eva was described as remarkably calm. They went into Hitler's private study and closed the door. Outside, the remaining staff waited. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the constant rumble of artillery. At approximately 3:30 p.m., they heard a single gunshot. Hitler's valet, Heinz Linge, waited several minutes. Then he opened the door. Adolf Hitler sat on a blue and white upholstered sofa, dead from a gunshot wound to his right temple. His Walther PPK pistol lay on the floor beside him. Blood was dripping onto the carpet and forming a small pool. Eva Hitler sat next to him, slumped slightly to the side. There was no blood, no visible trauma. She'd bitten into a brass cyanide capsule. The bitter almond smell of the poison filled the room. Eva Hitler had been married for approximately 40 hours. She was 33 years old following Hitler's instructions. Several SS guards wrapped the bodies in blankets and carried them up through the bunker complex and out into the Chancellery Garden. It was dangerous work. Soviet artillery shells were still landing. Bullets were hitting nearby buildings. They laid the bodies in a shallow crater, probably created by an artillery shell. Then they poured about 180 liters of gasoline over them and set them on fire. The bodies burned for several hours, but the fire didn't completely consume them. When Soviet troops captured the area on May 2nd, they found the partially burned remains buried in a shell crater. Soviet investigators eventually identified the bodies through dental records. Hitler's skull had a bullet hole. Eva's didn't, confirming she'd used cyanide. The Soviets kept the discovery secret for years, fueling wild rumors that Hitler had escaped to Argentina or Antarctica or somewhere else. But the forensic evidence was conclusive. Hitler and Eva had died together in that bunker on April 30, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 8, 1945. The war in Europe was over. Eva Braun's parents survived. Her father Fritz died in 1964. Her mother, Franziska, in 1976. Neither ever spoke publicly about their daughter. Eva's older sister Ilse died in 1979. The younger sister Gretel, whose husband Fegelein had been executed on Hitler's orders, became an alcoholic. She committed suicide in 1987. The photographs Eva took at the Berghof were discovered by the Allies after the war. They show Hitler in moments of apparent normalcy, playing with his dog, chatting with children, laughing at meals. They're among the only images of Hitler in private settings. Looking at those photos today, knowing what we know about the Holocaust, about the millions murdered, about the utter destruction Hitler's regime caused, Eva's photographs feel obscene. They show the perpetrator of history's greatest crimes, looking like someone's friendly uncle. That's Eva Braun's legacy. She's remembered as the woman who loved Adolf Hitler, who chose death over life without him, who spent 16 years in comfortable isolation, willfully blind to the horrors committed in her companion's name. Was she a victim? In some ways, yes. A teenage girl groomed by an older, powerful man, isolated, psychologically manipulated, driven to suicide attempts. But she was also complicit. She enjoyed the privileges of Hitler's regime. She lived in luxury while millions died. She never asked questions, never spoke out, never left. In the end, Eva Braun got what she wanted. She's remembered by history. Her name is known around the world.